Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Sean March. He is here to celebrate his wonderful middle grade series of Little Wade and Watchtower. Before Sean joins us, I have to give a big shout out to all the wonderful kids at the John Good School in Irving, Texas. I just had a chance to do a virtual performance for what a wonderful, wonderful group of students. I had such a fun time sharing the Magic Between Us is Respect and Kindness program. It's really, really a fun program. I love seeing those smiles. I love seeing them in person so much, but it's just as much fun seeing them on screen. I would love to bring a smile to the kids in your life. You can find out more about our live events, both in person and virtual, by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Parents Click Here button at the top of the page. Scroll on down to live events. Joining us right now from right outside our nation's capital. Well, if you're listening in another part of the world, because we have listeners all over the world, it might not be your nation's capital, but it's my nation's capital, right outside of Washington, D.C. Our guest is the author of a great new middle grade series called Little Wade and Watchtower. Please welcome to the show, Sean March. Sean, how are you?
Good morning. Very good. Great to be here.
It really is amazing, and every time I think about it, it just kind of blows my mind. I remember growing up thinking, wow, if I got on this certain radio station in Boston or in New York City, it has such a powerful signal that I might be heard in 38 states. And here we are, you and I are talking, and this is literally going to be downloaded to every continent on the planet. This probably won't get down to Antarctica, but we have been heard on Antarctica. We have regular listeners in the Amazon. I mean, it's insane when you think about it.
That's amazing. It's an incredible world we live in with technology.
So tell us about Little Wade and Watchtower. This sounds like a fascinating middle grade novel.
Yeah, so I actually was born and raised in New York City, and I lived there for most of my life. And Little Wade and Watchtower is sort of a love letter to New York City and childhood in New York City. And it tells the story of essentially of a pair of supernatural heroes that have secretly been helping New York City's kids since 1831. And it combines a bit of Charles Dickens and Edgar Allan Poe. And Little Wade is the ghost of a boy who died quite young at age 13. And Watchtower is it was a mysterious, magical, mechanical man who, with a sort of a lamppost for a face, who can disguise himself as a lamppost. He's a big, tall gentleman, wears a big top hat, and he supplies the brawn while Little Wade supplies the brains. And what they do is, and the way that what the novel sort of introduces us to, is they've been secretly patrolling the streets of New York City. They find a kid who's in need. They take the kid, they rescue the kid. They take the kid under their wing, and they basically help them solve their problems. And the book one of the Little Wade and Watchtower series is called Abigail and the Great Gang Trap. And it's set in 1899 on the Lower East Side. And it follows the story of a young girl named Abigail Reed, who is 13 years old, and she's just moved to New York from the country. And she's had a rough go of it. Her mom recently died of an illness, and her father works 3 jobs to support them. They're quite poor. And unfortunately, where she lives at the time, it's a neighborhood that has a gang problem. Specifically, there's a gang called the Long Shadows. And this is a gang that I created that's based on real life gangs in New York City. And so the novel opens where she's in trouble and the Long Shadows are after her. And luckily, Little Wade and Watchtower are there to step in just at the right time. And then from there, what they do is after they help her out and introduce themselves and reveal themselves to her, they offer their services to help solve her problems, essentially. And her issue is that she wants to go to school. She wants to walk to school safely. And so what they do is Little Wade and Watchtower offer her their services. They have business cards and everything. And what they do is they basically tell her that they lay it out for her. They're like, okay, you have these problems, and we're going to help you solve the problems one by one. And the trilogy, the first trilogy set in 1899 takes place over the course of one weekend, where Little Wade and Watchtower solve all of Abigail's problems one at a time so that by Monday morning she can walk to school freely and without fear, and they can help her deal with some of the other issues she's dealing with in her life. So book one is Little Wade and Watchtower, Abigail and the Great Gang Trap. Because step one so what they do is they give her a contract. They basically lay out their services of what they're going to do for her. And item number one is setting the Great Gang Trap so that they can basically take care of the gang problem for her, and then they can move on to some other issues that she's dealing with.
Well, since you brought up contract, I have to ask, is there something that Abigail has to do in return for these services?
Well, I think the main thing is it's less that she has to do something in return. I mean, what they say is there's all services free of charge. The only fee is secrecy, which is the only thing she has to do in return is keep their secret, because no one believes that Little Wade and Watchtower exist. You see, because Little Wade and Watchtower can reveal themselves to children, but they're forbidden to reveal themselves to adults. Because what Abigail learns very quickly is that there's a whole world, a hidden world of ghosts and other sort of supernatural phenomenon hidden inside New York, hidden in plain sight. And so the novel mixes real life historical details and events with the supernatural elements. And Abigail learns that she can't reveal their identity, but really it's more a question of they ask her what she wants and what she needs. And really it's more a question of they sort of act as mentors and guardians for her. And she's the protagonist. It's from her point of view. All the Little Wade and Watchtower books are from the client's point of view. And really it's more about helping her to identify what is it that she wants out of life? What is it that she's afraid of? What is it that she needs to overcome? What are her obstacles, internal and external? And the Little Wade and Watchtower help her do that. And their goal is to make sure that she is by the time they're done with their services and they move on to the next client, that they say goodbye, that she's ready to stand completely on her own and that she's faced her fears and overcome her doubts and essentially become the person that somewhere deep down she knows she can be, but right now, at the very beginning when they meet her, she's not sure.
Wow. What a story. Talk about, being able to get into this book and peel back the onion. There's so many layers, and I love that it's set in a time where New York City was a very, very different place than it is now. Why did you choose that time period?
So here's what's interesting. It's different, but it's also not very different. So in terms of why I chose the 19th century, it ties into why 19th century literature is so incredible. The thing about the 19th century is, first of all, there's no Google. There's no smartphones. You can't lean on technology. There are no easy fixes. So you actually, in an old-fashioned way, Abigail, Little Wade and Watchtower working with her, she has to solve her problems with her wit and her will. Second, I'm a teacher by training, and I wanted to write something where the grammar and the language and the vocabulary was something that kids could read and absorb. All the vocab words that teachers give you, it models proper grammar, good vocabulary, but also good manners. That's the other issue, is that Little Wade is a gentleman. And Watchtower, for all of his size, Watchtower is really interesting. Watchtower is 8 feet tall, but he can also grow to 12 feet tall and 21 feet tall. He's a colossus. He's a beast. But he's a top hat. He behaves very, 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 very gentle with the kids. And both Little Wade and Watchtower are gentlemen. They model good manners. And finally, the other aspect of the 19th century, which is fascinating, and it's one of the reasons why so much literature exploded out of that period, is it's not like the medieval fantasy or a Western or a crime thriller where you're essentially expecting one thing. The 19th century was an explosion of horror. It was an explosion of science fiction. It was an explosion of mystery. It was an explosion of romance. It was an explosion of the social novel with Charles Dickens, who sort of combined a little bit of all three. And so what I discovered when I was doing this, because the idea sort of came to me in pieces, was I thought to myself, there's a lot of possibility here. In Little Wade and Watchtower, in 19th century New York, which is this kind of mythic world, that it's gaslights, it's carriages, it's top hats, it's people being able to speak poetically, it's people being able to describe things in a really vivid manner. It's people who can make really witty jokes. It's 100% clean. There's no swearing. There's nothing else. It's very, very classy. But at the same time, it combines paranormal with Little Wade, with ghosts and with horror. It combines steampunk with Watchtower, the mysterious mechanical man. It combines a coming-of-age tale, much like Charles Dickens, dealing with, and this is where we get into how it's actually not so different from where we live now. This is set during the Gilded Age. You have income inequality. Abigail deals with poverty. She's just trying to go to school. She deals with the fact that she barely sees her father now because he works 3 jobs to support them. The enemies, there are some supernatural enemies, but a lot of them, it's gangs and other issues that are very, very, very relatable. They're things that are still going on today and in fact mirror a lot of the sort of the politics of the time. We have a young girl who just wants to get educated. She just wants to go to school. She wants to honor her dead mother. She wants to be a good daughter to her father. And she's in this brand new world because she's from the country, so she moved to the city. And what she wants is what we all want. She wants to be able to feel good about herself. I think that it's the perfect combination. 19th century New York for me became the perfect combination between really interesting history that is both fascinating but also very relatable and relevant to what we're dealing with today. It also, you can go in any direction in terms of mystery, horror, fantasy, science fiction. And then finally, it also is just a place where language and words you can use onomatopoeia, you can use vivid metaphors and images, and it makes perfect sense. And I found that, and that's why it was an absolute joy to write. Mm-hmm. And so far, from the reaction of all the kids that have read it and all the parents that have read it, it's a joy to read.
Wow. I'm wondering, as you're laying out all the similarities and the parallels and the vocabulary and all the elements that we can find in Little Wade and Watchtower, is this something that you set out to do? Did you sit down with an outline and say, well, I want to address this, and I want to address this, and I want to address this? Or was it like you just got caught up in the story, and then at the end you said, wow, look at all the different places we went?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating question. So here's how it all worked out. I dreamed about Watchtower one night, and I was like, what is this? This is amazing, right? He just sort of came to my mind. Little Wade is actually based upon my late brother, Brian, who passed away about 10 years ago. And he was a gentleman when he was alive. And I teaching for many years and tutoring for many years, I ran into several kids, many kids, who had some sort of issue in life where they realized they weren't able to live the life that they wanted to live. In the case of Abigail, she lost her mother. She moved from the country to the city. And suddenly they find themselves on a track they never expected. And as I was working with kids, I ran into kids wanted something that was entertaining, that spoke to their problems directly, that dealt with their problems truthfully, but in an inspirational way. And they also wanted something that they didn't mind something educational, but they wanted to kind of learn on the fly. They wanted to learn by doing. And so I sat down and I was like, I want to write something for kids. I want to write something in honor of my brother, in honor of our childhood in New York City together, because we grew up together in New York City, in honor of all these kids that they want something fun, that gives them something, that teaches them something, and it's about secret imaginary friends that aren't imaginary and are just for them. And so I started to put it all together between the needs of the students that I saw, honoring my brother, this mysterious being that appeared in my mind, and I just put it all together, and I thought, you know what? I think this works. I think if you go from 1831 hits, because the Little Wade and Watchtower saga can go for as long as it needs to, right? The idea is that they're still around, mm-hmm. and they've been around since 1831. That's when, by the way, that's when the first gas lines were laid out in New York City, because Watchtower needs gas right, to power his flame, because he's a living flame inside of a lamppost. That's inside a mechanical body. So I put it all together because I remember kids loved Edgar Allan Poe. They loved Charles Dickens. They loved, a lot of these books that managed to draw them in and teach them something at the same time. And that's how the whole thing sort of came together, was using my teacher training, honoring my brother, and also honoring a genre that I thought could do all of it at the same time, and a little bit of a dream.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, a little bit of a dream. I imagine waking up from that dream and where you met Watchtower, that might have been a little creepy when you woke up and thought, how did this person crawl into my brain?
You know what's really interesting is actually what's fascinating is, and I never forgot this, was there's a scene early on when Abigail first meets them, and Abigail is standing right next to him, and Watchtower steps in front of her. And this is after he saved her. And she looks up, and she cranes her neck and looks up, and Watchtower's 12 feet tall at this point. And his face is glowing and casting this warm radiance on her. And the way it's described is that he had a face like a star, because she sort of looks up and sees his shoes, his pants, his suits, his this, his that, and then finally she sees him. And that was how it was for me. I suddenly there was this tall being in front of me, and I looked up, and suddenly I felt like I was looking up at the sun, but it didn't hurt my eyes. And that's what I wanted to capture for kids, is this idea of Little Wade and Watchtower. What they do is they provide this very safe space where you can deal with a lot of very difficult issues for kids, but they feel safe, they feel inspired, and they feel like they're going in a direction where things are going to get better. And especially now with kids are dealing with a lot. They're dealing with COVID-19 and they're being, especially with the internet, they're avalanched with a lot of negative information. And what I wanted to do was create a couple of heroes just for them that said, okay, we are with you. And now we're going to deal frankly with your problems. You're safe with us. And then we're going to get through this together. So I think that was that warm light, that the idea of the face being bathed in that kind of warm light, that light of kindness, that light of encouragement, a light in the dark. That's really what it was. And I think that carries through sort of the entire book, that no matter how tough things get, and it's a rollicking adventure. She takes on gangs, and she does this and she does that, and there's all kinds of pitfalls, and the villains are really hardcore, but at the same time, she's not alone. And what carries it through it is that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Wow. We love encouraging families to read with their kids, and a lot of people think, oh, yeah, of course I'm going to read with my 5-year-old. But it's like, no. Keep reading with your kids through the middle grade years, through high school. And not necessarily sitting down on the couch, snuggled up together, reading aloud, although I think this would be a fantastic book to read aloud, taking turns to read. But co-reading, I think that this would be a great experience for a family to co-read and to sit down, come together, to have a conversation about the story on the way to school when kids are able to go back to school, or on the way here or there, or just sitting around the dinner table. What kind of conversations could you imagine families having if they were co-reading Little Wade and Watchtower together?
That's a great question, and I can answer that very, very clearly. First of all, one of the things that kids love about the book is written. It's very, very visual. It's action from Abigail's point of view, and it's dialogue. There's a lot of dialogue between her and Little Wade and her and other characters. So it's very, very easy to read. It reads almost like a play. So it's very, very easy for parents and kids and groups of kids to get together and read it. In fact, I did a school visit a few weeks ago, and they've already switched it and they're doing it for their read aloud. And it goes. So the format of the book lends itself tremendously to being read out loud, which is great. I think the main conversation, I think, is this is a great father-daughter tale, because Abigail has one surviving relative, which is her father. And obviously what you have here is, for young girls, I think, there are a lot of really great conversations to be had about what is it that you maybe feel uncertain about, what are you unsure of, where do you lack confidence, what are you afraid of? And then, and the book sort of follows Abigail's arc as she goes from frightened, newbie to the city to she becomes like a warrior by the end of by the time they set the great gang trap, she is a formidable presence. And I think talking to young girls about that journey, about how she makes it and how, what does she learn on the way to sort of step by step do that? She's mentored and trained by Little Wade and Watchtower, but by the end, she's capable of doing many things on her own. And I think between fathers and daughters, there are several scenes that I think are very, very important between fathers and daughters where Martin, her father, who works 3 jobs and he's a widower and he's dealing with a lot, he has to learn that at some point he has to let his daughter go, that the world is not always a safe place. But he can't shelter her. He can't hold her back. He has to trust her. He has to give her and allow her the ability to step out there and to face the world, on her own and trust that that his love for her has made her strong. And I think that there are a lot of really great conversations to have between fathers and daughters when it comes to this book. And in terms of fathers and sons and parents, and especially for boys, for example, girls like the story because it follows Abigail's arc. Boys like the story because Little Wade and Watchtower do a lot of really amazing things during the course of it. But more to the point, this idea of manners, this idea of what it means to be a gentleman, what it means to be, because when Little Wade and Watchtower, they approach Abigail, once she hires them, she works with them. She's their boss. It's not the other way around. They ask her what she wants to do. They have suggestions. They have plans, obviously, but it's very much a very, very formal, cordial working relationship with the utmost of respect. And what I've heard from readers, from parents with boys, is that they really like the idea of being able to talk to their young men about manners and how they should behave in a certain way. And they like that Little Wade and Watchtower makes gentlemen cool, because that's what they are.
We need that. We absolutely need to get back to that sense. Because when you think about it, and it's not just here in the United States, but we're living in a time where we're more connected. We have the ability to be more connected than any other time in history. However, we are choosing to take sides to the point where, and it's again, it's not just here in the States. It's it seems like everywhere. It's they're having these differences, and you can't have disagreements with each other. You can't have respectful conversations with each other. You have to take sides, and it's all about winning, and it's not about conversation. It's not about discussion. It's not about learning about each other. And boy, oh boy, we do need to get back to that.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And I think a big part of it is the goal was always to create some sort of a literature base for young people to read where that can be modeled for them. And they can say, oh, wow. Oh, so that's what it's like. Okay. Wow. That's really interesting. That's really cool. Here we have a working relationship between a young girl, a young boy, and a mysterious mechanical man. And they respect each other, and they talk about things, and they work things out. And they're not on their phones. They have to connect with each other if they're going to get anything done. And they have long, elegant conversations. They talk, they exchange information. And so I agree with you. I think a big part of it is I think we're all yearning for this. I think kids are yearning for this. I think parents are yearning for this, is that sense of modeling some sort of connection. And in some ways it's an old fashioned notion. And what I thought was, I think that this particular type of book, it models that in a way, in a kind of an old fashioned way, but an old fashioned way that is elegant and entertaining. Yeah. And I think that's one of the big legacies of the 19th century, is just this idea of, this is when a lot of our institutions were formed. The police department, the fire department, a lot of politics, a lot of the things we take for granted now were formed during this time. It was when they were fresh and when they were new. And I think what we need to do is we need to rediscover the idea that when you sit down across from someone else, boy, girl, when a boy and a girl work together, when they work together, they can discover so much about each other. Mm-hmm. Each person possesses so much that can be new. And that's the idea of a conversation, right? The idea of people getting together, not on their phones, just together, talking, running adventures, all this other stuff in a very analog way, and realizing that we bring whole worlds with us. Every person brings whole worlds with them. And if we work together, we can improve one another's worlds and we can learn from each other. And I think that that's my hope is that, and so far that's what's happened with all of our great reviews. We've gotten great reviews from everybody, and we've gotten great reviews from all our readers and kids and everything else, and teachers that have done it in their classes. They all say the same thing. They all say that everyone feels a bit more connected, and after they read this story, and they act a little nicer to people, yes. which I think is a good goal.
What a great result. And I also love that conversation that you're imagining dads and daughters can have, because I think that is so very, very important. And I think it's incredibly important for dads to encourage both their daughters and sons, but especially their daughters, to know that they are capable and that they are powerful and that they can deal with things on their own. And it's really, really hard for dads, even the dads who can say that, it's really hard for dads to kind of go, okay, now I trust you, go for it. I know I got to let you go. So have at it.
Yeah.
So I think that's important for dads to kind of process that.
Yeah, I just think that it's a critical importance. You know, all fathers go through that rite of passage where you've got to let your girl go. You have to let her go. But I think the main thing though is so my hope is that a father reading this book, which is from Abigail's point of view, and the father appears in several key scenes, and he has very much an arc as well. That the father realizes, wow, inside of my little girl, inside of my daughter's mind is a world of possibility. And with the right words of encouragement at just the right time, and with a little help and kindness from strangers, she can do anything. She can do anything. And also what he ends up learning is, despite their difficulties, and they have them, and I think all fathers should remember this, that no matter what the difficulties are, and no matter how sometimes it might be difficult for you to communicate with your daughter, that you are influencing her, and your strength is her strength, and your virtues are her virtues, and your hopes are her hopes, and with just a little bit of help at the right time, she can become everything that you want her to be, and most importantly, she can become everything that she wants to be. Sure. And I think that's the main thing, is to never, ever, ever lose sight of that or give up on that, no matter how tough things get or how discouraged things get. And I think that's one of the central and most powerful messages of the book.
Well, we want to know where we can go to find out more about Little Wade and Watchtower, so that we can find out about Book 1 and be the first to know when Book 2 and beyond are available.
No problem. So it's currently on sale on Amazon and Smashwords. Smashwords an ebook, Amazon on ebook and paperback. The paperbacks have come out beautifully. And there's also the website, www.littlewadeandwatchtower.com, which gives you the overview of the entire trilogy and series and when the other books are coming out. Book 1 is Abigail and the Great Gang Trap. That's step 1 on their contract. Book 2, Abigail and the Secret Passage of Hope, is going to be coming out later in 2021.
Awesome. Well, we've had a great time talking about so many different things all around getting to know Little Wade and Watchtower, and we've been speaking with the author, Sean March. Sean, thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I sincerely appreciate it.
You do not want to miss the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Dr. Lucille Burbank. She was a consultant on Sesame Street for many years, and she has written a book. It's called The Inside Secrets of Sesame Street. She'll be here. I hope you will be here too. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Chris, we want to thank our guest, Sean March. Be sure to check out Little Wade and Watchtower. Also want to thank my team, Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan, Alexia Brown, Hannah Pat Oboyski. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for having my back here in the studio. But most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.